Fight for Your Health TV show. I'm Richard Hackworth here with the host, Professor Buitron, who is going to introduce our special guest for today. And take it away, sir.
How we doing, brother? Well, we've talked a little bit about martial arts, and everybody's in tune with that, with all the systems and so on and so forth. But I have a great guest who's done a lot of studying and also bringing forth an old type of weightlifting. How can I put it? Warrior yoga, if you want to put it that way. And his name, he's known around the world as the Flowing Dutchman. My brother Haggard, how are we doing today? You doing good?
Doing great, Paul. Thanks for letting me speak here.
No, it's you're like I said, you're the guru in this and on this side of the realm. And let's touch base on
side, maybe.
and let's touch base on what exactly, just touch base on the functional aspect of gadas and juries and that type of weightlifting and what its benefits are to everybody.
Yeah, so you got to imagine this giant pole with the weight on one side, trying to pull you away, trying to force you out of your balance. And you start to picture some of the benefits that it can do for you outside of like muscular strength and muscular build. This giant, well, let's say it like this. You could say strength is lifting a certain amount of weight, or strength could also be activating a certain muscle in a particular way. Well, with this, there's a lot of momentum. So there's a lot of strength involved in trying to push and manipulate a certain weight. So in that way, your body adapts to training with a big gada. So this long pole, basically, you have multiple exercises, but the main exercise goes all the way around the head. So it's like you are in this tricep pull position. And from there, your shoulder girdle has to move from right to left, which is something that most exercises don't particularly do. So it's mobilizing and therefore lubricating the shoulder joint in a very circular fashion. And then at the same time, you have to use all the different small muscles and big muscles of your shoulder to actually work and get that weight over. And then one of the main benefits of that is also the grip strength, because I've heard it said that some people say the best way to train your grip is actually holding something, like holding a monkey ladder, for example. Well, with this, you're continuously holding a big giant pole. So your grip strength is going to fire up, and at the same time work on your shoulders, your triceps, and your core. So everything from the bottom up, from the feet, toes, all the way up, has to be in balance for you to be able to swing a proper heavy mace. Eventually when your technique becomes well with a lighter one, you will be able to stabilize yourself so that the core muscles have to work less. But with these heavy weights, you use your whole body, rotational strength from the upper body. And so this is one of the applications that you can use it for, which is very different than regular strength training, which is all in a straight sagittal way going forward. Now you actually move from side to side and engaging the whole body.
So now to clarify for our viewers, what is the standard name for the type of training that you do? And can you tell us about the different pieces of equipment that are used?
Right. So there's a big variety of equipments, and there's also quite a variety of names. So originally the gada, which is spelled Gada or Gadha, kind of depends, is a bamboo stick with a stone on the end. So they take these big river stones from the river Banaras from Varanasi, and they drew a hole in there and put a big bamboo handle in it. That is basically called a gada. Now, around 15 years ago, the mace was introduced. The mace originally was called a mace bell, and from there they made a steel version. So basically they took the concept of the gada and made a steel version out of it. Now, since it was called mace bell, some people started to call it a steel mace, and then also a mace. So I just tend to call it a mace, but people call it mace bell, steel mace. Then there's also the jori, which are very large, brightly colored clubs. Usually they have two clubs, and they use in this cone kind of figure. They go up. Then you have the mudgals, which are smaller clubs, wider, and usually about the same weight as the joris, but the joris are much taller. And there's a slight alteration in technique. So the joris usually slide over the shoulder, and the mudgals are more free over the shoulder instead of sliding it. So, and then you also have the Indian clubs, and the Indian clubs, people say that the British actually got that idea from India. So, of course, India was a British colony at the time, 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago. And when they came there, they saw these people swing these big clubs, and then they implemented that and took these small clubs out there, and they used it in their military. And eventually it even was a thing in the Olympics, I think for 1 or 2 years. So those are very small clubs, and they are used for mobility, stability of the shoulder, and rehabilitation. So this is kind of the spectrum we're working with. And the mace can go up from like 3 to 4 kilograms to all the way to 25, 30. And a gada usually starts around 10 kilograms and goes up all the way to 80 kilograms or 90 even. I think, no, I even saw one of 100 kilograms in one gym, which is a very, very large amount. So I still make the distinction between a gada and a mace because I do feel it's very different. But the main exercise can be done with both of them.
I see. And then as far as for our viewers, how would they get to see some of these exercises? What's the best way to like find you on Instagram, or do you have a website that they can go to?
Yeah, so I post a lot of my India tours and trips on Instagram and YouTube. Like Paul said, the Flowing Dutchman. And I've got, but you know, on Instagram, I usually post it when I'm in India, so then you can see the whole story. Otherwise, you have to swipe down and see what the journey was. So there you can, of course, see it. But if you want to, yeah, you probably hit on one of my videos. But just search for Gada, search for Jori, Jori, and you'll find the videos that you'd like to see from India.
Now, do you also have a virtual training program? Is there a way to get DVDs from you or watch you online that they can sign up for?
Yeah. So I have a website, functionalharbeats.com. That's HARBEATS, functionalharbeats.com. I've got multiple online mace training programs, which is like, you know, back in the day when you would buy a DVD, you get multiple DVDs and watch it at home. It's the same experience, but now you have online videos. So you basically have to log in to that website, and then you can watch and learn by yourself in wherever you want to learn, where you have internet.
Absolutely.
And for someone who's never heard of this, how would you recommend that they begin?
Oh, that's a good question. I'd say buy a light mace, around 4 kilograms. Start searching and start to work on your 360, which is the main exercise. Some people say the 300, 10 to 2 is also a good exercise, but I'd recommend the 360 because there's a little bit more space. You know, there's a little bit rest in the mid position, and you don't have to move all the time. So you can actually sit still and then activate and then go for it and try it again. But you really have to be careful with the weight, because most of the people that have a kettlebell, have done kettlebell training, they say, oh, I can snatch with a 30 kilogram kettlebell, and they buy a mace of 12 kilogram, and then they get it and they cannot do anything with it because the weight is so far away from where you're actually holding it that without proper technique, it's impossible to properly swing it. So you really have to start small. And of course, you can buy a course or you can find a trainer, which both of these will actually accelerate your learning curve much more than if you just start to try it on yourself.
Absolutely. Now, you know, the beauty of Haggard is that he has literally gone back to the origins and researched it, trained with the old schools, and you can see that in several of his videos, some of the documentaries, which is what I find as a real treasure. And this is not going back to, how can I say, like a Taekwondo or Savate school that is here. You actually went back to the origin of the country and started studying from them and started understanding what it was and brought it back and started teaching it in the way it should be done. You know, you went back to its origins. And to me, I think separates a lot of things.
Yeah, so I actually was already teaching the mace before I went to India for the first time. So my perspective has always been, you know, I'm a mace trainer. I teach people here and I focus on the Western world. That was my idea, and still is. However, when I went to India and eventually people liked that so much, I went multiple times, and then eventually a lot of Indian traffic came to my video. So, and now I'm kind of giving it back to their own culture as well. And it's also important to understand that the mace isn't, you know, even though it is, you know, it's based on the concept of the practice in India, you cannot really buy a good mace, proper mace in India. So even though it is an Indian concept, it's the teachings that I teach are a lot based on what the Western practitioners have started to do with the mace, based on, for example, the old tag fit principles. You know, Scott Sonnen at the time introduced that with the club bell, which was also inspired by the Indian clubs, but it's a little bit more structured. So there's a lot more that we have added to it. And in India, you have basically one move they do with it. They pull it over the shoulder, pull it over the other shoulder, pull it back over the shoulder. And that's what they do. So because it's a holy exercise, they see it kind of as an insult if you do something else with it. And that is kind of this fine balance where I'm walking on. On one side, I am putting in a lot of creativity with the mace. So I'm actually creating like new moves with it. And at the same time, I'm going back and trying to see, okay, where does it actually come from? Because I also see a lot of people that coach this and that try this saying, oh, it's this new thing that we have invented. And it's like, yeah, but not totally. You know, a lot of these practices eventually have their origin. And what I also see is that these new movement patterns that we say, for example, like animal flow, flowing with the mace, you know, they have these integral patterns that are already part of the ancient culture. So, for example, the Kushti wrestlers, they already have all these body weight exercises, very fluid. And so I see these overlaps and I'm very interested in, hey, wait a second, I think I've discovered something new, but is it really new? Right? It's very easy to see that. So in that way, I'm kind of researching, okay, there's this Gada work, and then there's the Jori, and then there's the Mudgal. And if you combine these practices, for example, the Mudgal, which is, you know, this club, which is around 5 to 6, 7 kilograms. It's called Kalakatai in India. And they use 2 or 1, and they swing it around the shoulder. It originated from Persia, which basically resembles holding a shield and holding a sword, moving it up and down. So it's also based on this martial arts fighting competition, but they have a large scale of exercises, like 64. And I just see a lot of resemblance of those exercises, which are now used by the mace, but which they don't use with the Gada in India. So this is the territory I'm working in, where I see, okay, so this happens here, this happens there. And India is so varied that in every state, they call it something different. So it's very complex to actually get a hold of what is correct and what is, because for every guru in every city, something else might be correct. So this makes India very disorganized in their, approach. We say, oh, it comes from India, but then again, are we talking about the northern part of this state in India, or are we talking about the south? And those can be two different countries in of themselves.
Absolutely. And you talk about the martial aspect and how it was a shield and a sword. You can see that in
Right.
some of the exercises that are there. Was this a military once used as part of the Indian military back in the ages?
I'm not sure if it was the Indian military. I know that I've heard stories that it originated from the time where Asia was still Asia, not yet Persia and India, and that the mace does come from a club. It was a weapon with the spikes on it. So eventually people were making heavier ones to train with that, and there's some evidence that was actually happening. But the idea of the shield and the sword does come from Persia, from what I know about it. So yeah, it is combat based. However, the gada, which they use right now in India, is mainly used by wrestlers. So the kushti wrestling, which they do in akhadas are these traditional gyms with a sand pit where they wrestle. They use the gada primarily as a way to train to, for example, pull someone over the head. So pull someone over your shoulder to simulate actually manipulating someone else's weight. And this is the interesting martial art aspect of it, which means that you have to time your body and strength in order to lift and manipulate a certain object. And you cannot do that if your technique goes the opposite way. So in that way, you're actually training that pattern and becoming stronger within that technique.
So this would be an easy transition for because if wrestlers are already doing it, then martial artists and MMA schools, this would be something that they could introduce into their training routine.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many possibilities. This mace is like a 4 kilogram. You can punch with it. You can move around with it. You can brace your core and let that thing slip around you like this, swing around you. It's just I sometimes compare it to, for example, like Bruce Lee said, like become like water, move with it. Like I've heard, I'm not a BJJ practitioner, but I've heard a lot of these stories that in order to practice these martial arts, you cannot force yourself all the time, because then you exhaust yourself within minutes. So you have to be very patient with you. Sorry?
You have to be relaxed, not tense when you're doing it.
Exactly. You have to be relaxed and move with the other one's strength. And that is the same principles I find in my mace training. So the first thing I teach people whenever I'm doing a workshop or I'm doing personal training is relax, because the moment they hold it, they're like tensing up. And the fun thing is that if you tense up, you make that 4 kilogram mace a 40 kilogram mace. Just like if you tense up with your competitor, you make your relatively easy competitor a very tough competitor, because after 3 minutes, you're exhausted. So in that way, I find the philosophies of these two complete, it seems to be different practices, find very overlapping. So I do see that same, I've had some martial artists come to my training, and they said the same thing. It's like, oh, this is just like what I'm doing in my practice. I have to be relaxed. I have to let go and move with the weight instead of resisting against it, which is also very interesting because it's so opposite of what usually people do when they train for strength, right? They tense up to lift something. They pause and they squeeze, which is the exact opposite you would want to do in a, for example, a combat situation.
Correct.
If you're holding a sword for a whole day, you cannot tense up the whole day, right? If you're in the battlefield, you have to, and also train your coordination, which is also something you train. This is something that is understated in training, I think, the coordinative aspect, which is very, very apparent in mace training. Because if your coordination is off, there's a big chance you either not swing properly or you're going to hit yourself somewhere.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I was watching, oh, go ahead, sir.
No, go ahead.
I was saying I was watching some of his videos on Instagram, and I have a 5-year-old, and she thought that, I guess it's called a mace. She thought it was a hammer. And so she said she wanted a hammer. And then she asked me if you were Thor. So I guess it.
Oh, I think that was actually a hammer. You know, sometimes I do swing with kettlebells and hammers too. Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm not Thor, but you know, I get that more often.
But there's also a spiritual religious aspect to the training in India, isn't there?
Yeah, the akharas, what I was talking about, they are basically temples. This is very strange concept for people from the West, but they have a religious figure, Hanuman, which is the god of strength. He usually has a gada in one hand and the world in the other. And he's the protector of the akhara. And everybody who comes in has to put up their shoes. They have to say a prayer to the god Hanuman. There's always a statue there. Some sort of kind. So they have to pay respect to the god. And before they lift the gada, they also touch it with their hand, and then touch their head and touch the globe of the gada too. So those are all, and that is part of the paying respect to the god. So yeah, that is definitely something you have to take into account when you decide to visit India. That is, you have to pay some kind of respect to the culture.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you have any of the equipment that you can show?
Yeah, sure. So these are joris. So they are big, orange, and you swing them, like I said, over the shoulder, like this. These are relatively small. The ones in India, they weigh almost 4 times heavy sometimes. So swinging from side to side. And then you have, for example, this is not a true gada, but it is a wooden handle with iron on the end of it and weighs around 12 kilos. This is the traditional swing. So you see I'm pulling it over the shoulder, almost like a rest pause, stop and go, and then pulling it again. So I'm using my hips, shoulders, everything has to be aligned to make sure that thing comes up. And if you don't do that, then it suddenly becomes like it will feel like 100 kilograms. Then I have, for example, this, which are more like mudgals. These are smaller clubs, and these are like the shield and sword, which you swing upward, side to side. So one is always stabilizing, has to, grip and hold. And then there's also the Indian clubs, which are smaller, still more mobility focused. And you'll see still there's weight on one side, but these are only like 0.7 kilograms, and you do more artistic, flowy movements with it, which is very good for lubricating all the joints in your elbow, wrist, and fingers. So this is some of the...
And those were very common exercises in gyms, in boxing gyms, wrestling gyms, fencing schools, back, I would say, pre-World War II. World War I, yeah. That was very common to find those or to see them. You always see those gyms, and you see a picture, and you'll see a couple of those on the side. So it was very common.
Yeah, you still find them sometimes in like a physio. They sometimes still have clubs for rehabilitation of the shoulder, but it's been forgotten in the last era, since the era of the bodybuilding culture, the era of physical culture kind of went away, and it all became very machine based. But
Absolutely.
before that, everything was based around sport, about technique. And that is so cool that we kind of lost that. But now trying to get that back is very, very cool.
Absolutely. When last question before we go. When are you coming down to the United States? Maybe we should do something about that. When you do come over to the States, you ought to visit Texas and see how we can push that a little bit more.
Yeah, I've been to Texas before. I've done workshops there too in the USA. So that is definitely on the plan. But right now, I'm not sure if the traveling is still very possible. So
Absolutely.
I'm planning to do it after my India trip. So maybe around May, April, June, and that way is the idea for now. Yeah,
Well,
but that'd
hopefully,
be a lot of fun.
I would say hopefully we can have you back on the show before you land here. Do you have some affiliates here that you're visiting, or is this something that you're still arranging?
No, no, I don't have affiliates where I would come, but I know quite a lot of people. So I just approach the gyms and usually we'll arrange something like a workshop, and I'll go from state to state. That's kind of the idea.
I see. And
Yeah.
any of the equipment that you were demonstrating are those things available for purchase online at your website, or do you have a resource?
No, I don't.
you refer people
No,
to?
I once tried selling a wooden mace, which is like a wooden light gada, which is awesome, but too much. I will not focus on sending because it takes too much time, and
I see.
I'm focusing on the educational part of it. So I work with some people, like I recommend some people that actually sell these clubs. Now there's a shop in England which is called Body Mind Fit. They have quite a good selection of clubs, different types of clubs. In Denmark you have Heroic Sport, which also sells clubs, and then there's multiple mace manufacturers all over the world. There's a big one on it, for example, Set for Set in the USA. They sell them, and then in Europe there's Life Max. There's Winners Win, Losers Lose.
And you can also order them. You can also order them from India as well.
Yeah. Gian Indian Jodi. You can find him from on the internet. Gian Indian Jodi. He sells the Mutgals, and the prince that I went to, Jaivirat Singohil.
Mm-hmm.
He also started selling Mutgals, so the big wooden clubs. That is actually also very, those are good sources. The Gada is a little bit difficult because it is so heavy usually, so it's quite difficult to ship, but it's very easy to make yourself. So I've got a video on YouTube how to make a Gada. If you search for how to make a Gada, you'll probably find my YouTube video. That actually explains how you can actually buy. I still have one here. You see that pole over there? That's a bamboo pole. I'm gonna make Gadas out of that. So you just buy a bamboo pole and you grab a pot, and then you put cement in the pot. Get 2 or 3 nails in the bamboo so it actually won't fall off. And then you break the pot, and then you have, weight on one side and the handle on the other. So it's a cheap way to get something like a Gada made.
Absolutely. Anything else that you'd like to say for the folks out there?
Yeah, just watch some videos on YouTube. I've heard that people really like them.
Well, I'm going to post the link to your YouTube channel in the video description when we upload the show, so that way people can find you very easy. And we look forward to having you again sometime soon.
Sure. Thanks, Richard Paul.
Great
talking.
Brother, you be safe, stay safe, especially with COVID, and keep on doing what you're doing, because you're you might not know this, but you're touching a lot of people worldwide, and you're
Mm.
making folks take a different approach at health and strength fitness that they never saw before. And some people might be tired already of going to the traditional, how can I say, barbell and pull, you know what I'm saying, counts and pull.
Yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah. And by
and
the
they
way,
might
by
do
no
something
means
else.
did I say, by no means did I say the one is superior to the other. I think
No,
all of them have their uses. I still use barbells. I still use, for example, pull-ups. They're great. But there's more to movement than just muscular strength. There's also, yeah, like I said, moving a weight and actually manipulating that with your body. That is also proper strength.
absolutely. And that gives people a different goal, because you can get stagnant and you need something to continue moving forward. And I think
Yeah,
the gatas and the meals and everything else does that and stops you right here, and all of a sudden you can start moving up.
exactly. And it is a lot of fun too. That is something that some people have forgotten, that moving is actually a lot of fun. And trying to perfect a technique is something, a skill, but skill, working on a skill is um, can be very motivating and inspiring for yourself.
Absolutely. So until next time, I'm gonna leave everybody with this. You all stay safe, be safe, and let's live life. Till next
Let's
time,
do it.
brother. You be safe.
Till next time.
Thank you.
I'll give you a call in a bit.
All right.